My name is Lacey, and I am 27 years old. I never imagined the happiest day of my life would begin with humiliation, echoing through a church microphone. But that morning, as I stood behind the wooden doors waiting to walk down the aisle, I could already hear whispers spreading through the pews like wildfire. My parents had insisted on hosting the ceremony at their church, the place where I grew up singing hymns and memorizing verses, and I thought maybe, just maybe, it meant they were finally accepting my decision to marry Daniel, a widower and the kindest man I had ever known. Instead, minutes before the ceremony began, I learned they had something else planned. The sanctuary was full, sunlight pouring through stained glass windows, guests smiling politely, unaware that my parents had asked the pastor for a few words before I entered. I remember gripping my bouquet tighter as my cousin rushed backstage, her face pale, whispering that my father was already at the pulpit. At first I assumed he was giving a blessing. Then I heard my name spoken in a tone I barely recognized. Cold, disappointed, performative. He said he loved me but claimed I was making the greatest mistake of my life. He told the entire congregation that marrying a widower meant I would always live in another woman's shadow, that I was throwing away my future, and that Daniel's past would ruin my life. The words hit harder because they were amplified, impossible to escape, bouncing off the church walls while guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My mother stood beside him, nodding, eyes filled not with sadness but certainty, as if public shame might still change my mind. Behind the doors, my hands trembled. But what hurt most wasn't anger, it was the realization that they never intended to support me at all. They wanted witnesses. They wanted pressure. They wanted me to walk away before the vows even began. For a moment I considered running, not from Daniel, but from the humiliation waiting outside. Then Daniel's 6-year-old daughter Emma squeezed my hand. She had been quietly coloring beside me, unaware of the drama unfolding, and looked up with innocent confidence that steadied my racing heart. She asked if everything was okay, and I realized that love sometimes arrives already carrying scars, already shaped by loss, but still capable of building something beautiful. The music cue started despite the tension, signaling it was time. I heard murmurs growing louder as the church doors slowly opened, revealing rows of shocked faces and my father still standing near the pulpit. In that moment, the scene felt unreal, almost like the dramatic headlines people click online. My parents refused to come to my wedding because my fiancé was a single dad. Except they had come, not to celebrate, but to shame me publicly. As I stepped forward, I remembered another sentence my father had just declared into the microphone. Dad said he'd ruin my life. The words hung in the air while every eye turned toward me, waiting to see whether I would break. My heart pounded so loudly I barely heard the music. Yet each step felt stronger than the last. I wasn't walking into disgrace. I was walking toward the man who had shown me patience, honesty, and a kind of love that didn't pretend life was perfect. Daniel stood at the altar, eyes red but steady, silently asking if I still wanted this. I nodded. The congregation watched in stunned silence as Emma prepared to walk ahead of me down the aisle, holding a small sign. She refused to show anyone beforehand. No one knew what it said, not even me. All I knew was that something had shifted inside me. My parents believed public pressure would make me small, but instead it forced me to choose myself, my future, and the family I was about to create. And as Emma began walking forward, clutching that sign with determination far beyond her years, I sensed that whatever happened next would change far more than just my wedding day. It would change how the entire room saw us forever. As Emma walked down the aisle ahead of me, the entire church fell into a silence so deep it felt heavy. Every step she took echoed softly against the marble floor, her small white shoes moving carefully while she held the sign against her chest like it was the most important thing in the world. Guests leaned forward, confused and curious, still unsettled by my parents' speech from the pulpit. I could feel judgment lingering in the air, mixed with sympathy and anticipation. My father stood stiffly near the front row, convinced his words had already planted doubt in everyone's minds. My mother avoided looking at me entirely, but Emma kept walking, calm and brave, until she reached the center of the aisle. Then she turned around slowly so everyone could read the message written in large, uneven letters. The words were simple, clearly written by a child, yet powerful enough to change the entire atmosphere in seconds. He didn't lose a wife. I didn't just lose a mom. Today we get a family again. A collective gasp spread across the room. Someone began crying almost immediately. The tension that had filled the church cracked open all at once. Replaced by something raw and human, I saw guests covering their mouths, wiping tears, and even the pastor lowered his head as if realizing the moment had become something far greater than a ceremony. Daniel broke down first, pressing his hand over his face as emotion overwhelmed him. I felt my own vision blur, realizing Emma had understood everything adults failed to see, that this wedding wasn't about replacing the past, but healing from it. The words my father had spoken minutes earlier suddenly sounded small compared to the honesty of a 6-year-old child. Whispers turned into quiet sobs, and the same people who had listened politely to my parents now looked ashamed for ever agreeing silently with them. Someone near the back began clapping softly, not loudly enough to disrupt the moment, but enough to signal support. Then another joined and another, until the church filled with gentle applause that felt like acceptance washing over us. My father's confidence visibly faded. His shoulders dropped as he realized the narrative he tried to control had slipped away. For the first time that day, he looked uncertain. I walked forward the rest of the aisle with tears streaming down my face, no longer embarrassed, no longer afraid. When I reached Daniel, Emma slipped her hand into mine and placed it together with his, smiling proudly as if she had just fixed something broken. The ceremony continued, but now every word felt meaningful instead of tense. Our vows weren't just promises between two people. They were promises to rebuild, to support, and to choose love despite judgment. A guest quietly recorded the moment on their phone, capturing Emma's sign, the crowd's reaction, and the transformation of the room from criticism to compassion. I didn't think much about it at the time. I was too focused on the warmth surrounding us, the feeling that we had crossed an invisible line from rejection into belonging. 2 days later, while we were still on our honeymoon, my phone exploded with notifications. The video had been uploaded online. Within 48 hours, it reached 11 million views. Messages poured in from strangers around the world, widowers, step-parents, children of blended families, people thanking us for showing a different version of love than the one society often judges. Headlines repeated the moment again and again. When the room read it, they broke down crying. Friends told me my parents' speech was barely remembered. What people talked about was Emma's courage and the way love answered, humiliation without anger. My parents eventually called, their voices quieter than I had ever heard, saying they hadn't understood until they saw the world's reaction. Forgiveness didn't happen instantly, but something softened. And I realized the real victory wasn't revenge or viral fame. It was standing firm in who I chose to love. That day taught me that sometimes the loudest judgment collapses in front of simple truth, and sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest power. If this story touched your heart and you believe love deserves to be defended, no matter what others say, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more powerful stories like this. Because sometimes one story can remind someone else that they are not alone.